Hello, my friends. Today we are talking about the daily life of ancient Rome. Here is our objective for this lesson. What? We can describe the daily life for ancient Romans. How? By excavating Rome and referencing a reading, which is what I'm going over in this video. Why? In order to determine how wealth impacted life. So let's get moving with a daily life in Rome overview. So it's important to know that nearly 1 million people are going to be residing in the empire's capital city, which is Rome. 90% of that population in the Roman Empire, though, is going to live outside of the cities and provide food from the inside. And today, what we're talking about is life of those within that city. Occasionally, you're going to see similarities and differences for those outside of the city. Most of the time, those living outside of the cities are going to be your poorer citizens. When we talk about those living in the city, you're not going to see farmers or people like that because they are making goods most of the time because there's not the space within the city walls to farm. So with that in mind, let's talk about our first topic, law and order. Now that we're in the empire, the ultimate source of law is the emperor, though the senators are still going to meet and have high status within society. Crime is going to be super duper common in Rome. There's some of the most common crimes are going to be stealing, assault, and murder. And to combat all that crime, they're going to have police frequently patrolling to keep citizens safe. However, most of the time, they are not going to patrol the poorer sections of Rome or other cities. So citizens have to try to protect themselves. They're going to do this by dressing poor, so making it seem like, oh, you don't need to attack me because you're not going to get anything from it, or by traveling in groups. Now, the wealthier criminals are going to face less harsh punishments. But any Roman, including the poor Romans, can accuse somebody else of a crime. And what we see right here is an example of a trial for those crimes. And they have a jury that decides whether that person gets a punishment or doesn't get a punishment. And so people, when they are accused of a crime, are going to try to win over the jury's sympathy by wearing rags or dirty clothes, or by having their wives and children sob in front of the jury. For religion, we already know a bunch about it and how, that was a mistake, and of how the Romans are going to adapt the Greek gods. But they believe these gods are going to rule over their daily life. And so they thought that they needed to please the gods so they could have a good daily life. And one way they tried to please the gods is through food offerings. Every family, they also think that if they give an offering in the shape of an ill body part, that would lead the gods to know what's wrong with them, and then the gods would fix it. So, for example, if I broke my ankle, I might leave an offering of a statue of a foot. And then the gods would know, oh, Miss Wood, she needs a fixed ankle, and they would help heal my ankle. And every family is going to have an altar where that family is going to worship the household gods. And the household gods are just gods that the people who live in that family are going to identify the most with. And eventually the Romans are going to worship the emperors themselves as gods. They're also going to accept other religions and other gods as long as they don't threaten the emperor. That's everything you need to know about religion. On to family life. So, in the family, you have the oldest male as the pater familias. And basically what he says is what the people do in that family. Even the grown children are going to listen to the pater familias. In more wealthy families, the men are going to have political positions, and that's how they provide for their family. In poor families, both the husbands and the wives are going to have to work. So in wealthy families, only men need to work. In poor families, both men and women are going to work to feed their families. Now, let's talk about children for a second. All babies are going to be born at home. However, both classes are only going to keep the healthiest babies. In order to determine if that baby is healthy, they're going to name it 9 days after it's born in a special ceremony. All boys, including poor and rich, are going to wear a bulla, which you'll see later in your practice again, as protection. And then when they're between the ages of 14 and 18, there's a special ceremony to celebrate that boy becoming a man. And he then offers his bulla to the gods along with everything childish in his life. And they celebrate him becoming a man. Now, all girls are going to be married between the ages of 12 and 18. Let's talk about education. So, for the wealthy, boys are going to be tutored by their fathers or slaves until they were 6. Now, when we talk about slaves, we're not talking about just some random people who are uneducated. Most of the time, we're talking about people who were captured from the territories that Rome conquered that are very educated. For example, they're going to have many of the teachers and tutors be Greek slaves. And then once those boys are 6, they're going to go to school with a teacher or tutor that is most likely a Greek slave, just like the slaves previously mentioned. And they'll stay at school until they're 12 or 13. And some of the wealthiest are going to stay until they're 16, which is when they'll start taking over part of the family's land. Now, the poor people, instead of going to school, are going to learn trades or leatherworking, or they're just going straight into the workforce, like as a servant. Let's talk about food and drink. So, with the rich, they're going to have very fancy meals. And so, a fancy meal might consist of bread, mice, parrots. Mice and parrots are delicacies. Things like oysters, too. Oh, jellyfish, snails, and dates are also delicacies. And they're going to have lots of dinner parties in rich families. Whereas the poor are going to have more simple meals like fish, asparagus, figs, and bread. Now, both are going to depend on something called the thermopolia in order to get hot or cold food that are ready to eat. It's kind of like if I was going to go to a fast food restaurant to pick up dinner for me and my family. Both poor and rich people really enjoy fast food, though poor people sometimes rely more heavily on that because it is a cheaper way to get food. Now, we're going to talk about more why poor people are going to rely on this in just a second when we talk about the home. But both are also going to enjoy water and water with honey to drink. Now let's talk about that house. The wealthy are going to live in the domus, and you're going to see this in your practice as well. In the domus, it's very, very spacious. They build it out of stone and marble. It's well decorated, and they have like an atrium which is super well decorated to greet their guests. They're also going to have kitchens. Now we're going to talk about the poor homes in just a few seconds. Now, in those kitchens, they're going to have slaves that are cooking for them. So this is what that atrium would look like. You're going to have fountains and statues and benches and columns, just all of the most lavish, expensive, fancy things that you can picture. Now, when we talk about poor people, it's very different. They're going to live in what's called an insula. And an insula is essentially an apartment building. which is above the shops. It's going to be crowded and dirty, and they do not have a kitchen. Instead, they have what's a portable grill, and this is going to make the room very smoky. It's also important to note that these buildings are going to be built out of wood in most cases, which means that there's a big danger of fire happening, especially at the highest levels. So here are some ruins of just the bottom level, which is not built out of wood. These would be the shops that they were living above. Above this is the wood structures with the apartment buildings. Okay, we're going to pause here and just switch over to what your practice is, and then we're going to talk about one other topic. So for your practice, I've mentioned now a couple of things that you're going to be exploring. You're going to be using this Google form to access a game. You're going to try these two links. I think the second one should work more than the first one. And you're going to fill in this form. I'm just going to quickly type so you can see after you've played the game. So once you've played the game, you're going to go to this form and answer the questions based off of the level. And it's going to go in I'll point it out to you. When you're in the game, you've played this game before. It's just different this time because you're not looking at the archaeology aspects of it. We're looking more at the Roman Empire aspects. And now it's frozen. There we go. So when you're in the game, there's this three yellow bars in a box, and that's going to be your navigational tools. In your Google form, it's going to go Insula, Domus, Colosseum, and Baths. Now, if you're like, Miss Wood, I think I should play a level, answer the form, play a level, answer the form, I would suggest that you take notes based off of your answers. That way you don't lose your progress because it's very likely that you're not going to finish this in one day. So once you've played a level, it'll look like this if you click on it, and it'll say you have fully completed this site. Restart excavation at Stratum 1. You don't want to do this unless you want to lose all your progress. Instead of trying to play the level again to get information, if you're choosing to go back to answer the form when you're done, I would just click on the yellow lines, find the notebook. From there, you just click on the level you want to know more about, and you can then look at everything you learned by looking at these exclamation points, as well as by clicking the findings section and clicking on the artifacts that you discover for each layer. And the little fill in the blank part at the end is going to come right here, so you can then read that if you need to. Okay, so that is the Google form practice. Now let's go back to talking about the daily life. When we talk about daily life, one piece that is very important is recreation. And this is where we're going to talk about those two other places you will explore. So the rich are going to have lots of leisure time, mostly because the slaves are doing all the work for them. But they're going to watch plays in theaters and musical performances in other wealthy people's homes. But both wealthy and poor people are going to relax at the baths, which is another location you will explore. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit about how the poor people and the rich people both clean themselves, and I think you'll find it very interesting. They also are going to have many festivals in general just to worship the gods. Now, there are two special locations that the Romans often entertained themselves with, and one is the Colosseum. At the Colosseum, you're going to see a lot of different things, but one of those things are gladiator fights, and the Colosseum is the fourth place you're exploring. And the wealthy people are going to sit closer to the action in the Colosseum, and the poor are going to sit in the highest seats. There's not an actual difference between what you're sitting on. It's just how far you are from the things. And when you're higher up, you really can't see as well. And the other place is going to be the Circus Maximus. And the Circus Maximus is a huge racetrack. So that's where they're going to have those chariot races. And the wealthy are going to sit on cushions, which are closer to the track, whereas the poor are going to sit on wooden benches, which are high above the track. Now, in general, it's important to keep in mind that the poor are going to outnumber the rich. And most people who live outside the cities are, again, those poor farmers. So that's majority of the people in the Roman Empire. So that's one big group that are poor. But the emperors are going to feel like they need to provide food and entertainment to keep those poor people from revolting. That's why their festivals, colosseums, and the Circus Maximus are so important to the Romans, especially because those poor people have bad living conditions, and if they figure it out, not only is the crime going to continue to be common and disease going to continue to be common, but they might figure out that they have the ability to attack the emperor and take over. So that's why they're going to have those free foods and entertainments for everybody, but especially to keep the poor in check. All right, my friends, you can go unlock everything you learned from here by clicking on the link at this end puzzle. You should have it now. Once you have this link open, you will need it for your mastery check, so don't lose it. Make sure you paste it into your notebook. Go and fill out that form, and that's everything you need to know for now. I hope you have a fantastic time with this, and please let me know if you need any help.